Welcome, Brenda, Vaca, to Poetry.LA. Super excited to have you here and to chop it up with you about Riot of Roses. It's a toddler press because it's 3 years old right now.
It's just 3 years old.
So can you walk us through a little bit for people who may not, who are watching, who do not know about Riot of Roses or how it came to be? Can you walk us through the timeline a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I wrote a book that is called Riot of Roses. And I was looking for a home to publish it. And it was taking longer than I wanted it to take. And at this point, I had shelved my own personal writing career for probably a couple of decades.
Oh, wow.
So I had a sense of urgency to get my book and my work out into the world. So I saw actually a friend self-publish her book, Tía Chucha Press, who I then published later, but that's a little bit of a fast forward. But I saw her do it, and I saw other people that I admire take their writing and their publishing into their own hands. So that encouraged me to step up and do that.
Right.
I didn't want to just go the Amazon route, though.
Right.
My big dream is to circulate in the library systems, to make it really accessible for independent booksellers, to also give a certain level of creative control to other artists that I'm working with. So I started a press. I started a publishing house. I didn't want to delay it too much, so it ended up getting the same name as my book. Originally, it was Guayaba House, because we have a house with 2 guayaba trees. Let me know if you like guayabas.
I do.
I should have brought you some.
You totally should have.
I'm going to find you this week.
Please find me this week. I love. Okay, keep going.
But who I bounced that idea? They're like, that's a terrible name. I'm like,
really?
And my mom was like, why? Just call it after your book. Like, who cares? Just go. Like, you've been working on this for so long. Another friend kind of confirmed that. She's like, that's a dope name. Like, use that as a name. So I did. Talked to a lawyer, set up the structure of a house. And it was probably one of the easiest things I could do. It was faster than I thought it would be in terms of the process of building the the legal documents and all of that good stuff. Opened my own account, my business account. I did something unusual as well. I did a Kickstarter. So I did crowdfunding.
Your support will go toward the cost of publication and also establishing a firm foundation for my new independent publishing house.
I was successful. I hit my goal. I exceeded it a little bit. It was a 30-day campaign. It was so much anxiety out the door. I succeeded with that campaign, and the book was born in 2020. I was part of a writing program, CLI. A lot of people in Los Angeles know about Community Literature Initiative, Hiram Sims. And so I went through that program, crafted a manuscript, started an institution, and published my book December 3rd of 2021. Wow. And it's just been a bit of a marathon ever since. So I did the first year of just getting my art out there, hitting up open mics, meeting people, started getting invited to different gigs and opportunities. And I published the second book by Tía Chucha Press, West of the Santa Ana, July 2022. I wasn't sure if I was going to open to other writers, but people started approaching me. I think they were interested in what I was doing. Other presses, I think, were also being very FlowerSong, so inspiring. Tía Chucha's so inspiring, seeing other writers and publishing houses step up and out during this poetic renaissance. And I think I was just so inspired and attracted by that it took me away. I was swept away in it. Still am.
So now we're in 2024, and how many books now? Just basically 3 years later, how many books right now?
We're on the cusp of 11 books right now.
That's a lot of books in a short period of time, right? How do you toggle between being a writer to then now being a publisher? How do you reconcile between those two?
The first thing I'll say is that reading other writers has always kept me inspired. And although I didn't always share my work out loud, I was always producing. I was always producing poetry. I was a preacher for a while. You could find in my sermon notes a poem. I pivoted to real estate after ministry, and you would find my poetry in my real estate agenda. It was like the weirdest thing. I'm writing poetry at open houses. It's very weird.
It's not weird. I don't think it's weird. I don't think it's weird. To me, it feels very. To me, when we talk to poets, none of us have linear lives, right? So to me, none of us are just poets, and that's it. We're poets, educators, poets, tour guides. I'm thinking about Mike the Poet, right? Like, who does that as well. We're cultural workers. We're lawyers, right? So we're filmmakers. So we're not just this one thing.
No.
So I think that poetry is not linear. So this doesn't surprise me, like, to a certain extent, that these are all the hats you've worn so far. So it doesn't surprise me at all. And there's also, I think, there is this connective tissue with all the things that you have been so far. To be a minister, you have to have a mastery of the spoken word. You have to be able to, weave language together to inspire other people, right? And that's what poetry does.
Absolutely.
And with real estate, I think you have to have persuasive language.
And selling ability.
Right. Exactly. So I think all of this actually does make sense. I think that it's part of your ecosystem, which I think is great.
It definitely is. Yeah, it all feels like it's leading to this moment of like creating and supporting other creators, like creating space for other creators. And I was a community builder when I was in the ministry and doing also like community organizing. So that kind of comes naturally to like, to encourage and lift up other people's gifts, to see it, to call it out, to invite them forward, to, encourage on the mic especially. Like I think the first time I was hitting the mics in public in LA, I had never done poetry in LA. I was in the Bay Area for 20 years. So no one knew who I was. But I can rock that mic, and people were shocked. They're like, "Who is this? Who does she think she is?" Maybe a little bit of everything, right? In my most sultry tones, I am innocent. In other ways, I'm a total slut. I mean that in the most respectful of ways. I get my whoring from the men in my family. If there's one thing you learn from the patriarchy, is that you self-harm most when you come to believe that sexuality and this body don't mean shit. Like it can actually be slam bam, thank you, ma'am. I mean, sir, como duele. The tío who had a whole other family, both first sons named after himself, what a farce, like, si todavía me amas como antes, ya nada me parece interesante. Yo sé que en el amor soy un farsante. Yo sin ti no vuelvo a enamorarme. When you do not value yourself, when you do not think you are enough, or you begin to compensate by thinking you are the shit like everybody wants you. El primo, in the middle of divorce, reaching for straws in love, was joking that a cachetada is all you need to keep your vieja in her place. Always seeking the next horizon, not even comfortable having an empty bed for a few short months, which I know feels like eons. There is nothing heavier than the emptiness of a bed than when your lover leaves you. I know what that's about. Spent so many times alone. For a long time, it was fine. I was getting to know myself, licking my wounds, changing the dressing, taking mariachi classes with La Sonia at the School of Arts and Culture in San Jose, cantando Paloma Negra, Paloma Negra. ¿Dónde andarás? But then came the days when the emptiness loomed large, said boo in the dark, and scared me more than a little. On those nights I sought solace, solace with the promise of a kindred, solace with the passion of thirst quenched, solace with the relief of an escaped arrest. There were times it was sheer biological need, my assertion on this earth plane that I am still here, purely physical, nothing twisted about it, just need, like hunger, rest, or defecation. At other times, it was a self-mutilation, trying to understand the original wound, the one that defies language. Some things, all they can do is sit. Bring it to a boil, Mommy says. Lower it and let it stew. Better left unsaid and set loose on the wind. In those moments with moon high in sky and the sun well below, I could see my shadows without shame. I could taste the anxious bile wet on my lips. I could smell the stench putrid and rotting. I could feel brave, brave enough to sit and stare until the truth glides into focus. See myself standing there, vulnerable and innocent, if even for a moment.
This poem is pointing what it does is it points the finger. It really is intentionally spotlighting the not so positive things of our family. Mm-hmm. I think that's a common thread of a lot of poesía that comes from writers of color, where we are constantly saying, no, I'm going to showcase this, right? It's important to name it. Because at least for me, when I name it in my work, it does take away a little bit of the heaviness of it, right? It just, you kind of like letting out the air out of a balloon a little bit. And that's how I always see it when I see it in other people's writing. And, los secretos, right? What do we do with the secretos? What do we do with the secrets, these family secrets? And then when you put them on the page, that's it, right? Like we can't take them back. And then how did the family react to it? So I'm really curious for you about Shadows Without Shame. Really, where did this one come from? And then secondly, why is it the first poem? Why is that the first poem you want us to see? And is that intentional?
Yes, it is definitely intentional. In the original way I crafted my manuscript when I was in the CLI program, it was not. It was like deeply hidden in section number 3,
wow, okay.
Which has probably a lot of similar themes around like sexuality and reconciliation. And the family secrets,
so
right?
You were literally burying it for a while.
Right. Oh, yes.
Like literally burying the poem.
It was deeply buried.
Right?
The first stanza was not the first stanza.
Wow.
So beautiful editors like called me out and called me in and had me rearrange.
Who were some of those editors, if you don't mind?
My wonderful friend Shuey Mendiola, who was one of the first readers. I would send them pieces in a text over the years, and when I was getting down to business, read the whole thing in its huge messiness. It was 7 chapbooks at that point. It was crazy because it's a thick collection. Told me like, hey, this is your first stanza, and this is the first line. And then it was confirmed in my writing workshop with CLI, other people, because when I first read that poem out loud, my voice was shaking, which happens when you call yourself a slut, right? This is one of my braver pieces, but it's also fun because of the music. So people enjoy it and will sing along now, which I love. And it just, at the end of the day, the book, and then I think therefore the house, is about amplifying stories that do remain hidden. The voiceless stories, the stories that never should see everything, like, shh, no, don't talk about it. Don't trust anybody. Right. That kind of narrative, to me, it's like a sense of calling. Probably also because I have the background in testifying and testimony, and then reclaiming power after like laying out your truth. So for me that, and also Augustine's Confessions is in my tradition, so like after pieces like this and other maybe spicier or thornier pieces, I can say anything political because I've already said it I've said things about myself. So for me, it's also, I'm lining up my own literary trajectory. I have a chapbook which I didn't mention. It's 6 poems for Palestine. And that's, especially in our new political context, our emerging political context, some of the stuff might be dangerous to say. Right. But when you can confess to your own, like who has power over you? Right. So for me, like nobody has power over me. And in terms of my family, if you know, you know. Right. If you know the tío, if you know the primo, you know who I'm talking about. I don't name names, except for Sonia. Sonia's like the only real name there in the entire book. She is real. But yeah, it just, for me, it was an act of liberation. And then just, reclaiming power.
and also just the nuts and bolts of what you just mentioned, right? And I think it's important that people who are listening or watching this really understand that when these books go out, that there is a process, and the fact that this was 7 chapbooks at one point, or that this was originally the first poem was buried, that is something that I think people who are writing poetry and hope to then publish it or put it out in the world, they need to know that the poem right now that's on page 15 may move to page 1 or may move to like the last page, and that's part of it. I do really appreciate you saying that, and that this wasn't the original, like wasn't the first page originally, and I think that's important for people to really
It was like
know.
one of the last edits, probably. Yeah.
Wow.
And it felt confirmed too, because a couple of my favorite writers, William Faulkner and Toni Morrison, and when you read their first chapters, you're like, none of this makes sense, but it'll make sense when you read the whole thing, and then if you go back to that first chapter poem or whatever it is, and you're like, oh, it all comes together.
Yeah, that happens a lot with Morrison, but now I can definitely see that. You're absolutely 100% right. And you mentioned earlier that you were you were an editor in your workshops or in college. Where did you go?
I went to UC Berkeley.
Oh, okay.
So I was an English major at UC Berkeley. I did creative writing workshops there. So I have a minor in creative writing.
Did you study with anyone there?
Alfred Arteaga, who has since left the earth plane, in terms of my creative writing classes. I also took a lot of African studies. The literature at the classes at UC Berkeley were amazing. The professors, Veve Clark, Barbara T. Christian, they were just phenomenal teachers. For me, they left such a powerful impact. So those are the people that I studied with. They gave me a critical thinking lens and permission to mess with the written word, which I loved. In the case of Barbara T. Christian, she did a class on Bible as literature. So it was like, oh, I get to mess with the Bible now. And if you can mess with like your sacred text, whatever your sacred text is, you can mess with your own work. So for me, I try not to be too precious or
talk about liberation.
Yeah. And Bridget Bianca does this. I took a little workshop with her this summer. She's like, don't be afraid to
Through Women Who Submit.
Through Women Who Submit, yes. Shout out Women Who Submit. Yeah. She gave us permission to like really rearrange. Yeah. And it was just another confirmation to not be so idolatrous, right, with our own work, which resonates with me. So I'm like, all right. And then as a spoken word artist, you can mess with it again. And it can always be a new thing, right? And that's what I love about words, period. It doesn't ever have to be static. That's powerful to me.
Not at all, not at all. Are there any writers, and they don't have to be poets, but are there any writers that you revisit, that you just enjoy, that you go to for inspiration and aspiration?
Absolutely. I already mentioned Toni Morrison. She's an all-time favorite. Nikki Giovanni. Haven't spent so much time with her on the page. Actually, I love hearing her voice. And there's so much documentation of her reading her work.
This is not a poem. This is hot chocolate at the beginning of spring, topped with hand-whipped double cream, a splash of brandy to give it sass, and just a little cinnamon to give it class.
So I love Nikki Giovanni. Ana Castillo has always been a favorite. Sandra Cisneros, I grew up with, was one of the first, probably the first Chicana writer that I ever read, like so many of us. Lorna de Cervantes, her just majestic, out of this world way of delivering her poetry, just always magic.
They tried to silence a nation, tried to send the people back to the four corners of the world. They drew a line in the sand and dared us to cross it.
And it's wild because in our anthology, we're working on Somos Chicanas, they're all in there. So I've been spending a lot of time actually with them on the page lately and revisiting the old texts.
An anthology is heavy. We're talking, so that's different. You're talking about taking care, right? Like caretaking children. Like now you have a host of writers and works. And so, and you mentioned Lorna de Cervantes, I know Carmen Tafoya's in there. I know Xochitl Julissa Bermejo's in it. So how do, again, so many folks who've been on the show and who are, who are still with us, thank goodness. So how has that's a different project. Yes.
Absolutely. I feel like I jumped timelines. Can I show off? Just I know it might shine in the camera, but
Sure.
I got to show you Somos Chicanas, the thickness of it. Like, this is definitely, as you say, it's heavy.
Yeah.
Doing an anthology, it's a whole other level. I feel like I jumped timelines. I remember hearing what the editors at Women Who Submit said about their anthology transformation. And it's true. I was not even like the editor from beginning to end for this collection. Lou Schweg is the curator, visionary behind Somos Chicanas, that features over 80 Chicana voices across our diaspora, which is incredible. We got poet laureates in here. We've got trailblazers in here. And it's hard to wrap my head around it. and I'm just the publisher. I was actually someone who submitted early on. I have one poem in this collection. Couldn't be more proud when it was accepted. But to be the publisher of it and like the
Right.
like the partera, it feels like you're the midwife of a collection.
That's a great way of talking about it. Absolutely.
And you have to say like push, like now is the time. So I'm like my old like I'm like push,
Breathe.
breathe,
Breathe.
yes,
Yeah.
breathe.
I do believe something like this will be required reading. This is a curriculum book. This is something that will be in Chicano studies departments for people to really to kind of pick and choose and pluck some excerpts from it, because it's a necessary book and we don't have too many of them. And like you said, we did have some of these pioneers in the Chicano writers movement, like Sandra Cisneros, like Elena Viramontes, Lorna Di Cervantes is definitely in there. So, but we need to continue that, right? And and again, I'm not a Chicana. That's not how I identify. But I know when I first started reading about Latinx literature in the '90s. Chicano literature was one of the first things I read, right? And then right after with the Nuyorican literature. So I'm super excited
We're related.
I know we are related because I mean we're related. We have shared a table, a proverbial table for decades, and we will continue to do so. I'm really excited for it, and I'm going to ask you to read, if you may. I love this title, poem. For the fat feminist who gave me back my body.
Yes.
Please.
I wrote this piece out loud on my way to my brother's house in Pasadena, who was then taking me to a Dodger game right before the pandemic hit. I guess that was 2019. Poem for the fat feminist who gave me back my body. You gave me back my thighs, those hips, the ones that never lie, that move to the right and to the left. Don't matter which way I try to move them, they have a mind of their own, jiggle and roll. You gave me back my breasts, the ones I always tried to hide, the ones that made me want to crawl inside this chest. Boobs that sagged so soon, when truth is, they are always started low, singing, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me. As soon as I come home, this bra comes off. Wires that dig into my sides, the ones that tried their damnedest to hike these casabas up to my chin, chinny chin chins. The same breasts I was told to hide, cover up, don't let them see your headlights. Tápate la pechuga, mommy encourages. And when I became clergy, pues todavía más, I had to buy a thicker, heavier robe. God forbid that anyone get offended when I'm trying to preach. God forbid that anyone see my headlights when I'm trying to preach the good news. God forbid, heaven forbid, anyone see this body I'm in. The same one Creator gave me, made from the earth, Adama, earthling, Eva, Tonantzin, Pachamama, my DNA, the one my mothers gave me. You gave me back my arms, the ones society tells me wear long sleeves. It can be 100 degrees out and I'm supposed to wear a sweatshirt. Nah, that's not for me, not anymore. These are my limbs and I am the tree. Fat girl, you gave me back my nostrils, the ones that there was no way I could hide. Breathe through your mouth or breathe through your nostrils. And like my mama, I didn't want to be the kind of fat woman that you can hear coming down the hall. the one that announces her entrance, snorting her arrival, sweat beading our brows, the kind of woman that sounds like she's about to have a heart attack. Oh, but we have been these women. So I couldn't hide these nostrils, these wide, nosy nostrils. There was this one time at Zamoranos in East Oakland when I was devouring a carne asada burrito con todo with Wendy and another one of her friends from high school. We laughed so hard after taking a bite of a tasty and crisp green cebollita. We laughed so hard that green onion literally flew out my nose through these nostrils. I give me back my nostrils. This nose that is too wide by society's standards, but the one that is just right for me, the one that goes on my face, the one that is mine. Oh, I'm not a mistake. I am on purpose, a thing of beauty, an amazing thing. My kin, same nose, same skin, same nostrils. Fat girl, poeta, goddess, indígena, diosa, cuatlicue, you gave me back my body. It runs deep, your blood, through these veins. No amount of hate, no amount of maiming, no amount of rape could water down this DNA. It is evidence on my skin. Touch these scars, Cristo said. This is proof that I am me. These scars, this struggle, are what lead me to this faith. My laughter has been key. This smile on me, this smile on my face, for the whole human race. And no construction of race or gender can dismember this body. No construction of ethnicity is going to keep me from being me and all I was made to be. You gave me back my body. For that I am grateful. May it be so, as in heaven, so below.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a fun one.
It is a fun one. And I definitely, the line that stands out for me is, I am on purpose. And I think definitely what you are doing with Riot of Roses, what you started 3 years ago, is purpose.
Yes.
And also the fact that you're representing Whittier, also I think that's important as well, because again, not a lot of people, unfortunately, like recognize Whittier or even know where it is. They're like, where is it? Where is it? And I think LA gets so much attention, obviously, right? Because it's that's the one that most people know. But here you are, establishing a press out of Whittier, a beautiful space that I've had the pleasure of like reading at and attending events. And I think definitely that line, on purpose, is exactly what you're doing and what this is. And you have purpose.
I do.
You have purpose,
Thank
and
you.
so does this press.
Yes, it does.
And I want to say thank you for being here today and sharing your purpose with us.
Thank you, LUIVETTE, for having me.
Oh,
I'm
thank
glad to
you.
have purpose and see yours too.
Oh, thank you.